Hey guys, so today I wanted to make a video about something that's been coming up to my mind a lot lately, which is the difference between adult and infant or child circumcision, and why these two are very different and why we have to take into account all the differences when we're thinking about them. So first of all, the main difference is there is no consent if you are a child or a young infant, and this is the main problem, is that you're cutting off tissue from an unconsenting minor who has no ability to stop it, no ability to say, "Ow, that's unspeakably painful. That's the most painful thing you could be doing to me. Stop." And you're taking away the most pleasurable part of me. Please don't do that. And there's no reason why it can't wait to adulthood. Of course, in adulthood, there's also the problem that there's very, very rarely full consent then either, because consent requires that the person be informed, and in particular informed that there may be a huge sexual diminishment because of it. And most men aren't told that they may lose most of the pleasure that they experience. And so that's a problem. With both adult and infant circumcision, is that there's almost never informed consent truly of all the effects of all the emotional and the post-traumatic stress disorder that can come from it. The fact, and yeah, there's a lot of different stuff with informed consent. That's a whole nother video. But so that's the first thing about it. The next thing that I think is really important that I've never really heard expressed very much is that, it seems like a lot of adults who have had it done only report a slight diminishment in pleasure on average. And why is this? If circumcision is in fact so harmful, then why don't adult men report that they've lost a lot of pleasure? And I think that there are a few reasons for this. And first of all, I'd like to say that even if it didn't take away any sexual pleasure, it still is extremely, extremely psychologically damaging and causes severe trauma for men who realize that something significant has been taken from them in terms of how much skin it is, how much it alters sexual functioning in different ways. And so even if there wasn't that much of a difference as an adult, it wouldn't really matter, because the men who find out and learn about it are still very, very traumatized by it, even just by the fact that their body was altered without their permission, and they didn't get that choice for themselves. And so even if it didn't do anything, it would still be a big problem. But furthermore, I think that for a lot of the men who get it done as an adult, the thing is, what you would expect is for the placebo, for their expectations, to make it so that they feel a lot better about themselves, they experience sex a lot better, and that there's a big improvement. And so you'd expect that when we do surveys of these men and say, has circumcision damaged your sex life or has it improved it, you would expect actually for them to say it's made it a lot better. So the fact that they're saying it's on average gotten a little bit worse, I think is very, very alarming, because if you're getting this procedure done, it's a dramatic procedure. You're altering the most intimate part of your body in a drastic way, and these men expect that it's going to make their sex lives better. Many of them have problems with their penis. They have rare conditions like phimosis. Many of them have very low self-esteem because they're often in the US, and they're taught that the foreskin is bad, it's gross, and so they expect to feel a lot better about themselves, and to, because of that emotional difference, to really experience sex as being a lot more pleasurable. And so with all these expectations that sex for them is going to improve, another thing is also they often are the men who don't really get a lot of sensation from their foreskin, who have the least sensitive foreskins, who have the least pleasure from their foreskins. And that's another reason why I think certain adults are willing to get it cut off, is because they're the men with the least sensitive foreskins. You know, there's a wide variety of foreskins out there. Just like every other part of the body, there's people have differences in different parts of them. And it's the men with the least sensitive foreskins who are getting circumcised as adults. Now, even with all of those factors taken into consideration, which you would then expect, well, if all of these guys have so many different reasons to expect that circumcision will make their sex lives better, then that's what you would expect to find. But even with all of those, it's still, you know, when we survey these men who get circumcised as adults, it's worse. So that huge discrepancy, I think, is how valuable the foreskin actually is. The fact that all of those reasons should make them feel better about it. And also, you know, men are taught not to be vulnerable, not to show weakness or pain. And so I think a lot of these men, when they're reporting, don't even report as bad as it is. So, you know, they should actually have a lot, even more than that. Like, you'd expect that these men are probably going to minimize damage, probably deny it to themselves, probably deny it to other people. And if they have bad experiences, they probably aren't going to be completely honest about that a lot of the time. And so there's even one more factor which makes it so that you would expect this to really be different results than we're getting. If circumcision truly had no effect on sexual pleasure, then you'd expect that for all of those reasons, men circumcised as adults should report that their pleasure hugely increases, because that's what they expect, because they're the men with the least sensitive foreskins, because they usually have some psychological weird stuff about feeling shame around it, or some kind of foreskin or circumcision fetish. You know, it excites them to think about that. And yeah, so all of those reasons, you'd expect each of those to make them report that it improves their sex life and makes it more pleasurable. And yet, it's not. And so it's really, I think that the fact that they actually report that it's less sensitive, that it is worse, we should actually really be thinking, not in terms of, oh, they report it's a little bit worse, so therefore it must just be only have a little bit of effect to make it a little bit worse. No, because these are all the men who we would expect for it to make it way, way better for them. So for the average man, if we just, you know, took out random men out of the population and circumcised them as adults, you'd expect then probably for those men it would be really, really, really damaging, because most men aren't going to have that less sensitive foreskins, have body images. Most men really, really, really like that part of their body and don't want to get rid of it. And so, yeah, that's my take on why it's weird. It's kind of a weird question to try to answer if men circumcised as adults, you know, can answer the question, is it better or worse? Oh, one other thing. Because they're surveyed shortly after they're circumcised, actually two other things. For one thing, they also haven't had their glands totally dekeratinized and rubbing against their underwear for their whole life, and so that part of the body is still much more sensitive, and so you have to take that into account as well. And you also have to take into the account that there's much less complications, there's much less risk of removing far too much skin. Usually adult circumcisions are much less aggressive, leave enough inner foreskin, don't damage the frenulum. And so all of those reasons have to be added in too, which all make adult circumcision less severe and less bad than infant circumcision. Therefore, we can conclude that there's probably a huge, huge, huge pleasure loss in infant circumcision, and some in adulthood too. Again, surveys show, you know, it does at least slightly decrease sensitivity. It almost universally makes masturbation worse, by the way, too. That's even completely agreed upon by even people in adult studies. It does make masturbation worse. And so it's probably much even more dramatic again for infants for all those reasons. So yeah, um, that's why we need to stop circumcising, because it removes so many function, it removes so many nerve endings, most of the nerve endings, and it's non-consensual. And if an adult understands all of that, if an adult is informed that that there are still definitely some adults, even who expect it to be great, who have problems, who have phimosis, who have all these issues with it, and get cut as adults, and still it ruins their lives. It destroys them. It makes them unable to enjoy sex. It can even lead to suicide. It can be so traumatizing. It can lead to depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you're informed of all of that as an adult, and you still want to get it done, of course you should be able to do whatever you want with your body, but you need to be informed of all of those risks. That would be true informed consent, because men do experience all of those things. And while there's only a slight, decrease in sexual satisfaction on average, at least that's what's reported, whether or not that's men being honest, still there are some who have dramatically bad experiences, and some that are a little bit better than average. But there's always that risk that even if you do have problems with your foreskin, it can still cause a lot of problems to get circumcised. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you have any other tips on things I missed, I tried to cover them all, but it's kind of a complex topic and I've never heard it ever covered before. But if you have any additions on why circumcision as an adult is different or better or worse than circumcision as a child, I'd love to hear your replies. Yeah, I know there's lots of stuff I missed. Another thing is, as an adult, you know what you're missing, which is horrible. But as a child, you don't know what you're missing. Which is horrible in a different way, because you always wish you could feel what it's like to actually be a man, and you can never actually even know that. And you're always wishing you could know. Versus knowing it and then, not being able to have it anymore, which is also horrible. So, yeah, leave comments, let me know what you think, what other ways it affects you. Otherwise, I'll talk to you tomorrow.